Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. DeMichael and I speculated on it last week, and it finally came to fruition. Jaren Jackson Jr. earns first-team all-defense honors in the NBA. Why, that certainly is the defining memory and overall thing to take forward from Jaren's 2021-2022 season. But while he was spectacular on defense, the exciting thing is there's even more room for him to grow, especially on offense. That and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go. Now, here we go.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one and all to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Shawn Coleman here with you, flying solo more than likely this week. DeMichael Cole has taken a well-deserved vacation after the spectacular job he and many others did covering the Grizzlies this season. Certainly hope he has safe and fun travels. He may or may not be with us at least once this week, but if not, right here with you every single day on Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. You can find me at Stats SEC, the show at Locked On Grizz on Twitter. You can find us right here on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe button. Lets us know you enjoyed the show and lets others be able to find the show as well. Also at DeMichael C for DeMichael on Twitter as well. Want to remind you also of the title sponsor to our show, betonline.net. Whether it's the NBA playoffs, it's baseball, it's golf, boxing, UFC, BetOnline.net's the fastest and easiest way for you to be able to bet on all the sports that you love. Check out BetOnline.net today. So we talked last week about how Jaren Jackson Jr., he certainly had put together a resume that was deserving of first-team all-defense. But to DeMichael's point when we discussed it, was it enough? Was it enough in which, when it comes to these annual awards, defense is going to be based more on reputation than, or defensive awards are going to be more based off reputation than offensive awards because you just don't have as much data, statistics on defense as you do offense. That's the case typically in all sports. But the thing that stood out to me was that of what was out there, both from an individual perspective and a team perspective, for the Grizzlies and Jaren Jackson Jr., there was enough for him to be able to get first-team all-defense nods despite the absolutely fantastic defensive talents he was going against for the 5 spots on first-team all-defense. We're talking Giannis, we're talking Rudy Gobert, we're talking Bam Adebayo, even Draymond Green, though I don't think Draymond made second-team all-defense, but I think one of the reasons why he didn't make first was because he just didn't play enough during the season. But at the end of the day, Jaren got the nod, and it was very deserved because one thing that stood out about Jaren's defensive impact this season is that it happened from beginning to end. If you look at his season, from the start of the season in late October till December 31st, Jaren was third in the league in blocks. In January, he had 50-plus blocks and 15 steals. Over the past decade, only Anthony Davis has had that many blocks and at least that many blocks and that many steals in a season other than Jaren. And then after January, Jaren was second in the league in blocks. Now, at the end of the day, blocks do not define overall defensive impact. But the key is that Jaren's defensive activity, in which he had 250 total steals and blocks this season, led the NBA in that category. Not only Jaren's defensive activity, but his impact as well was there from beginning to end. And that's why, despite not yet having the reputation, despite this really being the first step in Jaren hopefully accomplishing in time, having a reputation such as a Gobert or a Giannis or a Draymond, what have you. This was Jaren's first step towards hopefully achieving that reputation in time, but because he was so strong defensively from beginning to end, that's why he was still able to get the nod. And the thing is that Jaren stood out. There were elite moments all season long. 36 times this year, 36 games this year, Jaren Jackson Jr. had at least 2 blocks and a steal in a game. The only other players over the past decade to do that 36 or more times in a season, Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis, and Rudy Gobert. When you look at many statistical categories that when we try to quantify the quality of Jaren's defense this year, you're going to consistently see that only Gobert, only Davis, only Giannis, only Dwight Howard over the past 10 or 15 years. Those are the type of talents that have done. They're the only other type of talents that have done in the past what Jaren did this year. And that is a reason why you start to see how special of an impact Jaren had on defense this season. Jaren played over 2,000 minutes, had a block rate of 7.4% and a steal rate of 1.6%. The only other players in NBA history who had at least a 7.4% block rate, a 1.6% steal rate, and played more than 2,000 minutes in a season, David Robinson and Marcus Camby. Camby did it twice, so it's been done 4 total times in NBA history. Jaren did it once. David Robinson and Marcus Camby did it combined 3 times. Between Robinson and Camby, 12 all-defensive recognitions between them, and both have won a Defensive Player of the Year. So the point is not just talking about Jaren's season last year, not just showing how special it was, but when you compare what Jaren did last year to the other names that have done it, which are very, very few. What Jaren did last year was very rare from many perspectives on defense. But the fact that he did it at such a young age, that shows you that typically when players are doing it at the age Jaren did it, those type of players become some of the best defenders of their generation in the NBA. And we've seen that. Again, with Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, Rudy Gobert, David Robinson, Marcus Camby being the players that have done in the past what Jaren did this past season. So that's what's so exciting about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s campaign defensively. It's not just what he did last year. It's not just his potential defensively turning into production. It's the fact that he did it at such a young age. He joined companies of others who did it at his age in the past. Those players eventually became some of the best defenders of their generation in the NBA. Jaren has that potential. But here's the other key thing. Jaren Jackson Jr. was the anchor for the Grizzlies defense that was 6th in the NBA in defensive rating. A big reason why is because of steals and because of blocks, and that also helped with the fact that they didn't have Dillon for 2/3 of the season. Despite not having Dillon, they were able to lead the league in steals and blocks, which allowed for them to keep their opponents from consistently finding offensive success. But Jaren's defense is not just defined, again, by his defensive activity, blocks and steals, what have you. His mere presence made a huge difference as well. When Jaren was on the court, teams shot 7.6% lower at the rim when Jaren was on the court for the Grizzlies versus when he was off. That's a huge difference. Teams found it much harder to be able to produce in the paint or near the basket when Jaren was on the court against the Grizzlies versus when he was off. In general, teams shot 3% lower when it came to effective field goal percentage when Jaren was on the court for the Grizzlies versus when he was not. Those are huge differences that speak to the fact that it's not just Jaren's defensive activity, but it's teams constantly having to know where Jaren is. And it prevents them from being able to do what they need to do to find offensive success consistently against the Grizzlies. We saw it in the regular season. We saw it in the playoffs. And the other thing about it is that one of the biggest and probably most important things, probably the most important factor in Jaren's defensive production this season was simply the fact that he was on the court. For one, him being able to play 78 games, him being able to play over 2,000 minutes, coming off a last year or his 3rd year in the NBA where he missed all but 11 games due to a knee injury, for him to come back in his 4th year and play 78 games over 2,000 minutes, that's a huge compliment to Jaren's dedication to stay healthy. But also in general, it was the ability for him to be able to stay on the court when it came to less fouls. In his sophomore season, 2 years ago, when he was 20 years old, Jaren played 57 games and fouled out 8 times. This past season, Jaren played 78 total games, only fouled out 3 times. So one of the biggest things overall, one of the biggest factors in how successful Jaren was this year is him simply being on the court to put his talent on display. So that's why it's so exciting. Not only is it that Jaren got the rightful recognition that he deserved due to how special he was on defense this year, when you compare what he did defensively this year to other names in recent NBA history and NBA history in general, those players who did what Jaren did this year in the past, they went on to become some of the best defenders of their generations in the NBA. I don't think it's a stretch at all to say Jaren can do exactly that, building off this year moving forward. But the other thing that stands out is this. At times, Jaren struggled offensively this year, but he has so much more room to grow when it comes to being as consistent on offense as he was on defense this past season. We'll look at that in just a moment. Before we do want to talk with you, though, a bit about, you want to talk about, Jaren's dedication to, remaining healthy, to being on the court. Well, I can tell you this, you can make that same type of effort when it comes to eating better to try to make your life healthier as well. Feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you live a healthy, balanced lifestyle and truly enjoy it with delicious, plant-rich, transformational nutrition that builds a foundation for living in your best body. Now is the time to seek wellness, joy, and abundance in all areas of your life, starting with what you eat. With Sakara, you get nutrient-dense meals, snacks, and supplements that nourish your body without ever sacrificing taste or quality. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Right now, Sakara is offering Locked On listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/LockedOn20 or enter code LockedOn20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/LockedOn20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/LockedOn20. Can't thank you enough for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day, but certainly also want to remind you, I know that we all would love the Grizzlies to still be playing when it comes to pursuing an NBA championship. But the other thing that I can say is that the 2022 NBA draft is now a month away, and that means you should check out Locked On NBA Big Board with Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen. You've heard those names before as we've talked with them here at Locked On Grizzlies and on other Locked On productions. Make Locked On NBA Big Board your second listen of the day after Locked On Grizzlies. So what I'll say to the overall impact of Jaren on defense is that Jaren playing at the level that he did on defense shows just how valuable he is going to be to the Grizzlies moving forward. I've discussed that when you look at this roster, when you look at this team moving forward, what elements of it are championship worthy? I think that Ja and Desmond Bane as a backcourt are a championship-worthy backcourt. But I also think the other aspect of this team is that they have a championship-level anchor to their defense, which is Jaren. Now, just imagine if Jaren is able to get more consistent on offense, as we know that he certainly can. I'll put it simply to you. If Jaren were to be able to put it together to where he could have a season over the next few, to where he could have a season where he plays on offense like he did when he was a sophomore in the NBA, when he made 39% of his threes, shooting over 6 a game. If he could do that on offense in one season while also playing defense like he did last year, you have a clear all-star and a player that's pushing all NBA level recognition. That is the type of potential Jaren has. But the key thing to remember, it's the type of potential that he has, but it's also been proven. He's shown that he can produce like that. Now it's just putting it together. And this isn't meant as a complaint. This isn't meant as anything negative about Jaren. It's just a simple fact. It's exciting, really exciting to think, as special as Jaren was defensively last season, there's still significant room for growth when it comes to his play overall as a player. And what I mean by that is this, is that last year, Jaren attempted 13 shots per game. You want that from Jaren. You want your top 3 shot getters to be Ja, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. each and every game. Absolutely. And Jaren also showed a key ability at times to do better at finding his own shot, whether it be from 3, whether it be, inside the arc, working off the different parts of his game to be able to do that. For instance, Jaren Jackson Jr. going into last year, Jaren had 3 seasons in a row in which when he attempted shots, in which he had over nearly 65% of his shots or more in his first 3 seasons in the league were assisted. Last year, only 56% of his shots were assisted. So Jaren's ball handling, his confidence, his overall IQ when it comes to working off the different parts of his game to approach games offensively from a balanced perspective, being able to put in a healthy diet of both 3s and 2s to take advantage of whatever matchups he sees, all those things progressed last year. Unfortunately, what fell off a bit was the quality of Jaren's shots. For instance, Jaren was one of 51 players last season, during the regular season, who attempted 400 or more threes. 51 players attempted 400 or more threes in the NBA this past year. Jaren had the second lowest three-point percentage of those 51 players who shot 400 or more threes. At the end of the day, yes, you want him taking those shots, but you certainly want for Jaren to show a bit more improvement when it comes to hitting threes. The good thing, and the thing to build off of, is that he showed that capability. He attempted 5 points during the regular season. In the postseason, he attempted 6 threes per game. But here's the big key. The regular season, he made 31.9% of his threes. In the postseason, 37.8 or 37.5% of his threes. So Jaren showed a key improvement. He showed significant going from the regular season to the playoffs when it came to shooting the three. And that shows that Jaren can find his shot even when the Grizzlies are playing in the big spotlight and they're playing against significant competition. Jaren can still continue to find his shot and can continue to make his shot, even though he's on a bigger stage and obviously playing against good competition. That is highly encouraging moving forward. What that means is 2 things. When Jaren is being an offensive difference maker, the Grizzlies can beat anybody in the league. And Jaren also has the capability to be an offensive difference maker no matter who the Grizzlies are playing. We saw that multiple times in the playoffs. But it's not just Jaren's overall ability to continue to find quality shots to hit the three more moving forward. 35, 36%. If Jaren can become a regular contributor who's attempting 5.5 to 6 threes on a per season basis, and he's making 35, 36, 37 of them, that is going to be such a huge boost from what he did last year. Jaren may not have many more seasons where he makes 39% of his threes, but he doesn't have to. As long as he can consistently hit 35, 36, 37%, that'll be a boost enough to this Grizzlies offense to continue to allow for them to be able to rely on the three when they need to. But the other part of Jaren's game that really stands out to where hopefully there's going to be, some improvements this offseason is there was a bit of a fall off when it comes to Jaren's production from inside the arc. Jaren had averaged making over 70% of his shots within 3 feet of the rim during his first 3 seasons in the NBA. Last year, he only made 61.5%. Now, he definitely struggled to start off the year and got better as the season went on. But you're talking about a player with the mobility and the size of Jaren who shot just over 47% on 2-point shots last year. Coming into this season, Jaren had shot 55% inside the arc his rookie year, 54% his sophomore year, 55% his third year, and this year, 47.5%. That is a significant drop-off when it comes to Jaren's overall ability to consistently score. And again, we're talking about striking that balance. As Jaren becomes more intelligent, as he becomes more confident, as he becomes a better ball handler, and obviously the result from this past year is him creating his shot more often, the Grizzlies certainly want to make sure he also is achieving what they want Jaren's efforts to lead to consistent results. That will allow for him to be a balanced overall offensive contributor moving forward. So it's not just Jaren shooting the threes. It's also improving the quality when it comes to him finding his 2-point shot. You again have seen it in the past. You just hope that corrections can be made to where you can see it again in the future. So at the end of the day, last season certainly was probably a bit more inconsistent offensively than many had hoped for. I agree with that. But I do think that we also saw some improvements in the foundational aspects of what can make Jaren a more consistent offensive contributor moving forward. He's able to get his shots. He's now better able to create his own shots. It's just now getting into the flow of being able to consistently hit those shots that he finds. A lot of it will also have to do with as Jaren moves forward, not letting things that happen early in the game, whether it be foul trouble, whether it not be hitting his shots, Jaren just becoming more comfortable of knowing, hey, it's not working out early in the game. I can find it later on. We saw him do that a few times in both the regular season, late in the regular season and in the playoffs. So yes, at times you can certainly see that Jaren probably is thrown off of his game a bit due to early foul trouble or what have you. But Jaren also showed the ability to remain the excellent talent that he is, to remain focused on being a difference maker. And we saw that multiple times in the playoffs, and the results certainly were there that showed that even against good competition, when Jaren shows up, in which he showed up consistently, but when Jaren truly is making a difference on both ends of the floor, the Grizzlies are a very tough team to beat. We've seen Jaren play for a full season at the level that he needs to offensively to truly be that all-star level type player. We likely will see it again, hopefully as soon as next year. Jaren's doing a much better job at finding his own shot. Now it just needs to come with hitting those shot attempts that he makes, and I think that we will see a vast improvement in that going forward that will allow for Jaren to take that next step offensively that will really make him, Ja, and Bane be one of the best offensive trios in the league. So what does all this have to say for Jaren moving forward as next year he steps into a much more important role for this team, being their highest paid player next year? What does this all mean for his role moving forward? We'll look at that in just a moment. But like I feel many should bet on Jaren showing offense improvement and moving forward, I think that when it comes to you wagering and betting on sports, the best bet for you is betonline.net, because it's the fastest and easiest way for you to be able to wager and bet on all the sports that you love. Because the key is this: when you want to wager and bet on sports, you don't want to have to worry about how you're placing your bets. You want that to be as easy as possible. You want to worry about all the things that you consider to know which bets to place. And the great way for you to do that is to go through betonline.net. It makes it simple and easy to place your bet and wagers. Plus, it has great resources for you to make the right bets that you want to. Check out betonline.net today, either on your mobile or laptop device, and it'll get you taken care of. Check out betonline.net today. Later on this week on Locked On Grizzlies, the awards recognition is not over with yet. Towards the middle of the week, we're hoping to see Ja Morant announced as either a first or second team All-NBA member. Once that happens, we'll certainly break down Ja Morant's historic season for the Grizzlies as well. One that, yes, hopefully is going to end with some awards recognition for Ja, just like we've seen from Jaren. But just like Jaren's season was, this is just the starting point for what hopefully will be an amazing stretch of Ja's career in a Grizzlies uniform. We'll look at Ja's season and hopefully what will be considered an All-NBA season. We'll look at that a bit later on this week here on Locked On Grizzlies. So as we know, the big storyline from last summer, this summer, it's going to be, will Ja, and it seems every indication is that he will Ja take on the next extension in his contract? Will Ja take on the max extension following his rookie contract? And it certainly seems like that will be the case. But one thing that we do know already is in place is that Jaren took on a big commitment from the Grizzlies last summer. Towards the end of last summer, Jaren agreed to a 4-year, $105 million deal with the Grizzlies. And his contract will actually scale down as time goes on, but he will remain one of the highest paid Grizzlies players over the next 4 seasons. And his defensive campaign from last year certainly makes him more than worth it. Because again, not only are the Grizzlies now paying probably below market money to one of the best defenders in the league, as I just discussed in the second segment, for Jaren to be as young as he is, he has significant room for growth that you don't see a lot of players who are getting paid the money Jaren is have. And that's what makes it so exciting. And at the end of the day, there's a reason why the Grizzlies made that type of commitment to Jaren Jackson Jr. They truly believed he was a foundational piece for what could be a championship core. And he showed that he is exactly that last year. Yes, you want the consistency to be there. Yes, you want for him to be able to stay on the court, which means his health needs to be in line, which means he needs to continue to foul less, what have you. But the whole thing is this, is that no matter if you feel that there are several different ways Jaren can get more consistent, or no matter if you feel that, yes, his offense at times potentially takes away from his defense. If you think that, I don't really agree with you. But my point is that the playoffs themselves showed, and the journey last year to the playoffs showed, the Grizzlies are at their best when Jaren is at his best. I know that's an obvious statement, But the point that I'm getting at is that the Grizzlies went from a successful rebuild to a sustainable winner to a potential contender all in one season. It is no coincidence that the reason that they made that giant leap occurred at the same time that Jaren was making his giant leap of turning his potential into production. If this Grizzlies team is going to feature Ja Morant as its face of the franchise, as its number one player moving forward, and they're going to have Desmond Bane as being one of their top 3 or 4 players as well, they're going to need a strong defense to support that offensively focused backcourt. And that starts with Jaren Jackson Jr. Yes, I can agree with you. The overall contributions of Ja probably are going to wind up being the biggest reasons that will either mean the Grizzlies will win a title or if they never win a title. A lot of it comes back on Ja probably being the best player on this team during those championship pursuit seasons. Perhaps the Grizzlies find another player on Ja's level. That's to be seen. But my point is that even if Jaren is not the one on this team, even if he's not as valuable as Ja Morant for future championship cores, his defense is going to be just important because of how it complements the strengths of Ja and Desmond Bane, which are focused on offense. Jaren anchoring a top 10 defense for the Grizzlies year in and year out. That is what's going to be just as important for this team to be a championship contender as the offensive contributions of Ja and Desmond Bane will be. And then you throw into the ring Jaren potentially getting better on offense. That's what makes it so exciting. There are going to be few bigs, in my opinion, moving forward, who are going to be as impactful in the modern NBA over the next decade as Jaren Jackson Jr. if he can figure out how to remain consistent offensively. What does that look like? Potentially probably 16 to 20 points a night, shooting 35 to 37% from 3, making over 50% of his 2-point shots, hopefully getting back to shooting about 70% at the rim. And it also helps out for his foul rate to hopefully stay down to where he's not getting as many early fouls called on him. Plus, his rebounding was able to improve as well. If you want to know where Jaren was rebounding-wise, go look back at many of his playoff games in which he was approaching double-digit rebounds on a game-in, game-out basis. With Jaren playing more of the 5 moving forward, and the numbers all suggest the Grizzlies are at their best with Jaren playing the 5, the concern has been with him at the 5, where is the Grizzlies rebounding going to be? And to the point of those that make that point, that was missing in that game against the Warriors. So yes, the Grizzlies will have to figure out how that it cannot be as big of a weakness in future playoff runs. However, with Jaren himself, I truly do feel you saw enough promise from a rebounding perspective for him to really be able to take on playing the 5 more consistently. You don't want him playing the center position 30 to 35 minutes a night, night in and night out. Steven Adams' presence really helped Jaren, I think, remain healthy, focused on what he needed to focus on. So yes, other members of the Grizzlies team certainly contributed to Jaren's overall success this year. But the point that I'm getting at is that you saw enough improvement, obviously defensively. You saw enough improvement with him staying on the court. You saw enough improvement in his rebounding where you can trust Jaren to play the 5 when the Grizzlies need to feature their best lineups against the NBA's best competition. That version of Jaren that we saw last year, that is a very valuable player. That version of Jaren is good enough to where it makes his contract a bargain. But again, the most exciting thing about Jaren Jackson Jr. is that we're probably still 2 or 3 levels away from him really emerging as being the final evolution of himself. That's the player that is making sure that he is an offensive difference maker, just like he is a defensive difference maker. So without a doubt, Jaren Jackson Jr. is at the level of value that many of us had hoped he would be before the season started. He exceeded expectations when it came to his defense. He improved in the needed areas that he needed to improve in when it came to limiting fouls and improving his rebounding. And he showed enough flashes on offense to make people realize that we still are significantly a ways away from what the final version of Jaren could be. You know that he's going to put the work in. You know that he's improving his intelligence and approach to the game to improve his consistency. And you know for those reasons, it's good to have faith that he's going to make the improvements offensively that he needs to make to really approach the type of player that he could be. Again, it's all about turning potential into production. Jaren did that last year from a defensive standpoint. He's focused on doing it from an offensive standpoint moving forward. The end result is potentially one of the best two-way bigs in the league moving forward. And if Jaren is able to do what he wants to do offensively while maintaining his effectiveness on defense, that not only makes him an even more valuable version of himself than he is now, it also adds to the Grizzlies becoming more of a true contender for multiple seasons in the future than they are now. So at the end of the day, Ja Morant may be the most important factor, the most critical component to this core being a true championship contender. But in my opinion, it's going to be just as important for Jaren to maintain his impact on defense while improving his consistency on offense. If he can do that, then I really, really feel this Grizzlies team will be in line to challenge for a championship for many years to come. And it got off to a great start this year. Hopefully it will only continue to progress moving forward. A lot of fun, and congratulations to Jaren Jackson Jr. on winning first team all defense. You know that he's excited because he put in the work. You know that he's putting even more work now in to be even better moving forward, and it's going to be exciting to see. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. It's so much fun talking about the season that was, how exciting it was to see the development of these young players, and realize that this is just the beginning moving forward, hopefully with even better things awaiting this core and this fan base. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.